Okay, up to the north, a new dynasty emerges for the Chinese, the Han dynasty, famous dynasty. Third Han king gets his armies together, starts moving down to the south. The son of this guy, who's the Namdae, recognizes the approach of power, realizes, I think, that he can't fight the Han Chinese, so he says, okay, I will accept you to be the day of everybody. I'll just call myself a king, and you leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone. And the Han emperor agrees. If you no longer call yourself a day, if you become under my protection, and you can be independent. I'm not going to appoint your commanders. I'm not going to appoint your district chiefs and things like that. But you're under my supervision. So that's agreed to. So then, bit by bit, the Han dynasty imposes direct rule. Chinese administrators start coming in, and we're going to focus now on this part of Vietnam. Down here, there are some people, there's some Cham people who live along here, who are, they're not Mon Khmer. There's lots of issues as to where the Cham come from. They're related to people in Indonesia. And they're probably, they may have come up from Indonesia, and they lived along the coasts. And they were sailing, and they were growing rice, but they're also probably, they traded. And they may have been pirates. They may have put together expeditions and gone out and captured things and brought them back. But we're going to focus in on this area here. Now, bit by bit, the Han Dynasty Chinese begin to impose Han law and administrative structures, district chiefs, and in particular, about 38 AD, the Han are insisting that the Vietnamese adopt Chinese marriages. Now, what's a marriage? You go to some place, you sign a piece of paper, husband and wife, you're married, big deal. Well, when you think about it, what a Chinese marriage is the bringing in of a daughter-in-law to the patriarchy, to the patrilineage. Which, by the way, the Chinese form of marriage is what the Vietnamese use today. And there are two basic parts to it. One is the Dam Hoi, where the husband's family, as a family, on behalf of the family, goes to call on the bride's family as a family and ask for the young woman as a bride to come join their family as a daughter-in-law. And her family agrees. And this gets to the whole point of arranged marriages and things like this. And then there's the wedding, which is when you go dong zao, you go to the husband's family, goes to the family of the daughter-in-law, picks her up, and takes her away. And there's supposed to be at that point, right, a real emotional crisis between the daughter and her mother, because she is leaving her mother forever, in theory. And in the Chinese side, it's pretty true. Because on the Chinese side, once a daughter has left and gone over, she's gone. She's no longer yours. She's with that side. She's with the husband's family. And in the Chinese pattern, this pattern of Chinese patriarchal structure, the function of the wife, woman, mother is to serve the altars of the husband's ancestors. So she's supposed to do that in various ways. She is supposed to produce sons for that family. She's supposed to cook. She's supposed to run the ceremonies and basically be a very dutiful, filial, obedient daughter-in-law. So let's imagine now Vietnam, 38 AD, and the Chinese are saying, no, this is how you got to do it. And the Vietnamese are saying, no, women, we do it our way. We have sons-in-laws, our women are important. We don't want to be subordinate to men. Well, now there's a governor general who comes in to Vietnam from the Chinese, Do Dinh, and apparently he's also very cruel, and he's insisting on all these things. And one of the things he does is he kills the husband of a princess who is coming out, a Vietnamese princess who comes from this Hombang dynasty, the tradition of the aristocratic families. And her name is Trung Trác, and she has a younger sister, Trung Nhi. And these two ladies in 39 AD start a rebellion against the Chinese. Now, the significance, this is very famous in Vietnamese history, and this is a big deal. The Hai Ba Trung, the two Trung ladies, the two Trung sisters. My sense is that basically Vietnamese look to this as an expression in 39 AD of Vietnamese independence. We don't want to be ruled by the Chinese. We are different from you. We have our own culture, our own land, our own mountains and rivers, Heaven has given us our own right to be ourselves, and we're going to fight you. The thing I find rather interesting is that the first big revolt is led by women, not men. I think there's significance to this on two levels. One, the women were being threatened by this new Chinese culture. Because it's pretty clear that if you go to the Chinese patriarchy, you're going to lose, a lot of your overt power and control. And secondly, the Vietnamese followed the women. I mean, how many revolts were led by women around the world in 39 AD? So Jesus Christ was crucified in, 33 AD, I think, or somewhere along in there. I mean, clearly thousands of Vietnamese men and women, but mostly Vietnamese men, were willing to grab their swords, go off and fight the Chinese, led by these two women. Now, the revolt is crushed by a very famous Chinese general, Ma Vieng, who comes and crushes the revolt. And we have now about 900 more years of Chinese rule. It's an interesting period, because my submission is that the Chinese may have been ruling superficially, but underneath, inside, these Vietnamese were keeping their Vietnamese with some modifications, but they kept their Vietnamese-ness. The other Viets from the other side of this mountain range on up to Shanghai basically became, over the centuries, more and more Chinese. Now, there's a reason for that. More Chinese moved from the north down here. There was more intermarriage. Up north, there was more intermarriage. There was more direct access to Chinese culture, civilization, education. You can understand it. However, even today, there's similarities in pronunciation and sounding between modern Vietnamese and the regional dialects of southern China. So if you go to Hong Kong, or you go to Guangdong, or you go to Guangzhou, or Canton, or these places, you will hear the way the local people speak. It sounds more like Vietnamese, because there's an ancient sort of affinity there. The Chinese that we hear most of the time, Mandarin, comes from the north, sounds very, very different. The official Chinese from Peking, or what you hear on the movies and everything like that. One of the key differences is the Mandarin Chinese, apparently under the influence of Manchus and Mongols and other people, dropped initial hard consonants, and they dropped final consonants. So Chinese is very soft and lots of like these kinds of sounds. Vietnamese still have hard consonants, N's, M's, NG's, ng. Vietnamese has hard final consonants, the T's, TH's, D's. So that there was something going on with these people here, which I don't have an answer for. Something going on with these people here that they cared enough about themselves to try to preserve their own sense, their family patterns, their language, their values, their beliefs in individualism, in fate. But something else comes in about 200 AD. Buddhism. Buddhism comes to Vietnam before it comes to China. Buddhism doesn't come to China until about 600 AD. And Buddhism comes to China from the West. Buddhism goes from India over here, up to today's Afghanistan, around up into the deserts, to Western China, and then through Western China into the North China. And the Buddhist dynasties are 500 AD. The first great dynasty of China, the Sui dynasty, 800. We have records, 200 AD, 250 AD, 300. Scholars are here writing sutras, Buddhist sutras from India. The supposition is they came by sea. They came by sea, by boats, from India down here, because we have Buddhism down here, the Khmer Empire. They come by sea down here, and they come around, and they come up here. So part of this Vietnamese-ness brings in something of this Buddhist teaching. This is where I think this concept of Phuc, as in Phuc Đức, Phuc, good fortune. The Phuc concept is coming from Buddhism, that there's some kind of good fortune that you get because of what your ancestors have done. And Buddhist monks begin to emerge, and Buddhist monks are going to be very influential advisors around 939, around 1000, when the Vietnamese revolt against the Chinese and push them out. They're Buddhist monks, Van Han in particular, who advise the kings, who have a philosophy, who have writing, who have understanding. So that means there are going to be about 600 years of Buddhism in Vietnam with the Vietnamese people. So Chinese rule at the top, but the matrifocal family life is still going on. Buddhism is coming in, and the Vietnamese never lose their sense of mountains and rivers. And in about 600, there is a revolt by one Vietnamese with the family name of Ly, Ly Bon. But when he drives out the Chinese for a while because they're weak. The Tang dynasty hasn't come up yet. China's weak. So he figures he's got an opportunity. He organizes people, has an army, drives them out. Only lasts about 10 years. But he takes as a reign title, Ly Nam Day, Ly the Southern Day. So here we have about 600 years after this guy who had this kingdom of Nan Yue, this reemergence of this concept of Nam Day. My sense is it's not a reemergence, it's a survival. That these people kept in mind the sense that they could have their own relationship with heaven. And by the way, if you have geomancy, if you read faces, if you have fortune telling, if you consult yin and yang, that's how you know what heaven wants. You don't need to ask the Chinese. You can consult all these things because yin and yang is moving all the time around you, and you can read yin and yang for yourself. As an individual, as an autonomous individual, you can find guidance from heaven, and you can shape your own morality and your ethics. So under this period of Chinese rule, quietly, we don't have a lot of historic evidence for it, some notion of Vietnamese-ness is, if you will, locking in. And what happens then is, again, responding to Chinese opportunities, the Tang dynasty collapses about 900. And China breaks apart into very weak dynasties and feuding dynasties, and China's going to be weak for a couple hundred years until the Sung dynasty gets into control. But as the Tang are getting weak, another Vietnamese who has some magical quality to him rises up. His name is Ngo Quyen. He rises up and leads the Vietnamese. So what the history says about him is, think of this in terms of fatalism. When he was born, a bright light filled the house, and it unusually illuminated everything. He had 3 black spots on his chest. Like remember face reading? If a little baby is born, they got 3 like moles, probably just 3 ordinary moles, 3 moles on his chest. Who put those moles there? Heaven. And if those moles are strategically located, right, that means this little baby has got some special power inside him. And this was seen very strange. Oh, and his face, they even have a reference in here to face reading. Te tung jola la. It's very strange. And the conclusion was that he could become the boss of one region, Lam Chu, Một Phương. And so they gave him the name of Quyen, which means authority or power. So here is about 900 Vietnamese, having lived under the Chinese for about 1,000 years. This little baby is born. Notice, he's not even born to a royal family or necessarily a powerful family or a wealth. He's just born. And people write, they study, oh, this kid. Strange light in the house. Think of our Christian story at the time of Easter, when Jesus is born, and then there's a star, and the Magi come, and all this, you know. So this boy grows up, and people are willing to follow him. And so he organizes an army, beats the Chinese, drives them out, and becomes king, and also takes the title of Day somewhere in here. I can't remember. No, he doesn't take a day. Sorry. He doesn't call himself a day. Anyway, he dies. And in a pattern we see, people do not accept his sons to be of the same stature. They don't have wheat in. So the rule cannot go on. And the sons lose control, and there's a period called the 12 Lords. So the territory is divided up among 12 warlords who are fighting with each other. And they can't control things, and it's chaos and anarchy.